Watch more programs like this on cable and stream with PCN Select. Subscribe at PCNTV.com.
Michael Bagdes-Canning, Green Party candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Why are you running for this office?
Well, I guess I'm an old retired guy. If you'd asked me 12 years ago what I'd be doing right now, it certainly wouldn't be doing this. I'd have talked to you about farming, about spending time with the love of my life, Karen. And then our eldest daughter, Jennifer, told us that we were about to become grandparents, and everything changed. We started looking around at the world we were in, and we knew that we didn't want Doug to inherit the world that we were seeing unfold. We've since been blessed with 4 additional grandkids, and our sense of urgency has only decreased. And I say urgency because I've got this quote hanging right here that really speaks to me. And that's Dr. King on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963 said, "We are faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. And we, in this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. And this time, there's no time for apathy or complacency." And so that's what informs me. We're confronted with this situation right now, and Karen and I decided that we needed to act, and we wanted to fight the evils with environmental devastation, racism, poverty, you name it, and that's what informs my run. I mean, from that point on, I believe that the government's job is to protect us and future generations, and yeah, so that's why I got involved in this governor's race anyhow.
Mike, let's find out more about your background. Currently, you're the mayor of Cherry Valley Borough, and whereabouts is that in Pennsylvania?
Okay, we're in the northwestern part of Butler County, which is, for those who need Pennsylvania geography lesson, that's in directly above Allegheny County, which is where Pittsburgh's at. So we're about an hour north of that.
Now, Mike, tell us more about Cherry Valley. Just how big a town is it?
It's tiny. It's a tiny little town. I think last time I looked, there were 39 registered voters in Cherry Valley. It's a rural community. It's pretty old. We're an older community. One of the reasons I'm mayor is, well, the only reason I'm mayor really is that our mayor of 51 years died of COVID at the end of last year. And they needed someone to step up, and I was that person.
Mike, what are some of the tougher issues you've had to deal with as mayor of Cherry Valley Borough?
Oh, we don't have too many tough issues in Cherry Valley. We have 3 miles of roads that need regular maintenance. There's that. Every once in a while, we have weather issues that need to be dealt with. But we're like I said, we're a tiny borough. We don't have much in the way of issues. The big thing is the roads.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about access to broadband. And we know that can be a problem in rural Pennsylvania. In fact, we're seeing some evidence of that right now during our interview with you. So just tell our viewers who are not familiar with any problems you might have out there, how's your broadband?
It's terrible. The FCC says that 25 megabits per second download speed is basic. And on a good day here in my house, and we've got actually pretty good internet compared to some of my neighbors, it's 3.4, and that's on a good day, which is not often. It's on a good day. And that became an issue in particular during the time when we were dealing with remote schooling for kids in this area. And why it was an issue is, for instance, Karen and I were watching our 2 of our local grandkids because their parents were at work. And so they were both on this remote learning, these Zoom meetings or Google meetings, whatever the heck they were on, I don't remember now. But if they had to both be on at the same time, our system would crash. But we're fortunate. Some of my neighbors, they had to drive to the high school parking lot and sit in their cars to access the school district's Wi-Fi system. Not an ideal situation when you're talking about the middle of winter, which is often when this was happening. Not a good situation. And right now, there are no plans. Our local broadband provider, CenturyLink, have no plans to upgrade our system. The local cable company, they're not local, but in Butler County, the local cable company said they'd be glad to run a line to our house. It would only cost me $10,000. It's crazy. And having access to adequate internet is a big deal. It can make a big deal economically, especially now when we're talking about remote working conditions. It can make a big deal, it can make a big impact when we're talking about with schooling with kids. So yeah, it's a horrible situation.
Well, Mike, do you have any ideas or any policy proposals that might help improve your access to broadband there? And certainly there are plenty of other small communities in Pennsylvania that would be interested in solutions.
Yeah, well, one of the things I'm talking about, and again, because we're in a rural area, is it would be great if we could have our local rural electric cooperative stand up like they did with electrification. Back in the 1930s, electric was was an issue, but in rural areas we didn't have access to. Well, I shouldn't say we. I wasn't around then, but there were people in this area did not have access to electric. So the electric cooperatives came in with help from with the Roosevelt administration, the New Deal. They were able to pass legislation for electric cooperatives and. So the cooperatives came in. I own my electric company. Me and my neighbors, we all own the electric company. So it'd be great if we could do something like that. And if there was funding available for rural communities to do something like that. So yeah, that's one proposal for sure.
We're going to get to other issues shortly, Mike. But first, I understand you're retired from the classroom, as you pointed out before. Tell us about that job.
Yeah, well, I worked at a facility for delinquent and dependent boys in Grove City. I did that for 29 years. It was a public school on the grounds of a private facility. I taught primarily the last half of my career there, I was there 29 years. The last half I taught primarily reading to kids who could not read. And before that, I worked with kids who were seriously emotionally disturbed. So that's where my background is there. And I guess also just to build out my qualifications, I was a union leader. I was president of my local and also vice president and also a building rep. So I'm a staunch union guy too.
What did it take on your part, Mike, as a teacher, to take care of these kids who had these special circumstances and challenges to deal with?
No, I probably, especially during the last half of my career, I had the best job on campus. Like I said, I was working with kids that couldn't read. These were older adolescents. And when they started to learn to read, they were thrilled. I mean, you can imagine what it would be like to be a 16-year-old and going to school and constantly being confronted with the fact that you were not able to do a lot of the stuff that you were required to do. So I rarely had behavior problems and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that did for me was that it confirmed to me something that is, I guess, a function of our schools, how our schools are funded. And that was, I taught kids who came from Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and lots of other places in between. And these kids learned to read fairly quickly with the kind of intensive instruction they were getting from me and from the other folks that were working with them. But what they told me were things like, especially I remember Philadelphia kids telling me that they were in classrooms where the roofs leaked, or classrooms where they didn't have adequate heat and they were cold a lot of the time. A lot of these kids came from poor neighborhoods, and they didn't have access to food. A lot of times they were hungry. So I think we need to look at, number one, schooling. We shouldn't be funding schools with the property tax. That is inherently unfair. And the other thing we need to look at is the fact that the share of state funding has gone down steadily since the 70s. So we need to rethink that.
Mike, let's revisit your point of just a few seconds ago. You said that we shouldn't fund our schools with the property tax, and that's always a big can of worms here at PCN, and particularly with our viewers on the call-in show. So then what would you do if you got rid of the property tax system? How would you fund our schools?
Well, first of all, let's not continue to subsidize multinational, very profitable corporations. Just for instance, this is my background for the last 10 years. I've spent organizing around climate and fracking. Right now, we subsidize the fossil fuel industry, and the fossil fuel industry is extremely profitable at the moment. And we give them all kinds of tax breaks. In 2019, $3.7 billion went to the fossil fuel industry in the form of tax breaks. And on top of that, another 118 million of state funds went to propping up the market for that kind of stuff. And what do we get for that? We get, I remember Ronald Reagan talking about the welfare queens. Well, I see, and the AFDC, the Aid for Family with Dependent Children. Well, we have a new AFDC, and that's Aid for Dependent Corporations. We need to, these profitable corporations don't need to be propped up by the state of Pennsylvania. So let's make them pay their fair share. Also, let's re-examine, this would take a constitutional amendment, I realize it, but we need to re-examine how we tax. Right now, our income tax is a flat rate, which is inherently unfair to poor people. They are paying way too much for the services they receive. So I would also push for that. And then
Mike,
the funding would be coming out of the general fund.
you mentioned fracking only a minute ago, and that made me think about an incident in 2014. In the Butler School District, there was a problem at a natural gas well, and it made an impression on you. What happened there?
You're talking about Summit Elementary School?
Yeah, there was,
Yeah.
it was, first it was considered a fire at a gas well, but I don't think it was. Anyway, the main thing was that there were concerns about toxins being released in the air.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm doing a lot of organizing, and I've been doing a lot of organizing. And in 2014 at Summit Elementary School, which is in the Butler School District, I got a phone call from a parent, and she was distraught. She said that the well behind Summit Elementary School was on fire. So I drove down, which was it's a half an hour drive from me. But I drove down and I looked at it, and it wasn't actually a well fire. What it was a flaring well. Now, that to me was alarming as well, because we're talking about flaring, which is no longer, they definitely don't want folks the oil and gas industry doing flaring anymore.
So what is flaring, Mike? Excuse me, I never heard of that. How's that different from a fire?
Okay, well, it is a fire, but it's a controlled fire. And what happens is when they drill a well, and this was a fairly new well, excessive amounts of pressure build up in the well, and they can't do much with all that pressure. So what they do is they ignite it and let it burn off. Well, when they burn it off, it releases all kinds of toxins. Now, this school, it was alarming as heck. This school is at best 700 feet from where this well was flaring. The playground where the kids were to go and playing soccer, as it turned out, a little bit after I got there, was less than 500 feet from this well. And I was a little bit alarmed. So I reached out to one of my contacts, the Southwestern Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project, and I talked to one of their community liaison folks. And I said, is there something to be concerned about? And she said, absolutely. And she wrote a thing. Well, actually, first she called the superintendent of the Butler School District, but she also wrote for me a little note that I could forward to the principal of that building. And anyway, it was basically, these kids should not be outside in this thing. This is dangerous.
Mike, our time is limited. Was the community compensated in any way? Let's say that.
No, not at all. No, this is what happens over and over in the industry. I mean, they don't really care. I was at a meeting last night in Washington County where there's a huge cancer cluster in southwestern Pennsylvania, rare cancer with it's called Ewing's sarcoma. And again, we're talking about local government, county government, state government, all permitting a very dangerous and toxic industry to come into these communities. And these kids were exposed to this kind of stuff. And we're talking about not only the Ewing sarcoma, but also asthma and all kinds of other skin conditions, you name it. And premature births and all these kind of things. There's over 200 studies that talk about how horrible fracking is for the human body. And yet our state, not only do they encourage it, they subsidize it. So, yeah.
So let's consider this, Mike. We've talked about your range of experiences over the years. So which of these experiences would make you an effective lieutenant governor?
I guess what I would like to think is that I'm not someone who's going to go along to get along. One of the other issues I've been working on a lot in the last several years is corruption. In Pennsylvania, it is entirely legal for lobbyists to gift our legislators almost anything. We're talking Super Bowl tickets, free breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, you name it. So if, like I said, I'm not one who's going to be taking any of those kind of things. I'm against gifts of any kind, but I would push it, and I would use my bully pulpit as the lieutenant governor to talk about corruption, and I'd call them out. I'd call folks out that were corrupt.
Let's talk about some of the responsibilities, the duties of being lieutenant governor. And one of those duties is being president of the state senate. So what's your understanding of this job?
Again, not much, but I can look at my predecessor. I don't think I'd want to be fighting like he did with some of the senators.
Who are you talking about, Mike?
Yeah. The other small town mayor that is currently
would that be John Fetterman?
Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Absolutely.
It's important our viewers know who you're talking about, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess I would exercise those duties as needed, but of course it's not very often. I mean, I'd work with the Senate.
Well, here's something else. Here's something else the lieutenant governor does. They're on the board of pardon. So let me ask you this broad question: what kind of changes would you recommend for Pennsylvania's criminal justice system?
Yeah, that's another thing that I've been working on quite a bit. And one of the things that I would love to see happen is a reimagining of what our criminal justice system is. And pardons plays an important part. In Pennsylvania, we have something called death by incarceration. It's not called that by the state, but that's what it is. If you're sentenced to a life in prison, then no matter what you do while you're in prison, you serve the rest of your life, which makes no sense on a number of levels. Number one, I would hope that our prison system is not all about punishment, that it's also about redeeming the folks who committed these crimes and to make them productive citizens. So I would hope that we would do something along those lines. We'd reform our life sentences. I would be very interested in also looking at how we grant parole to folks. I mean, I know Dr. Oz is making a big deal out of Mr. Fetterman's pardons, but yeah, I think it's wrong. It's wrong fiscally. It's very expensive to keep people in jail. I think we need to re-examine that.
What else can state government do, Mike, to help with second chances after prison?
Yeah, well, I think how about while they're in prison? Let's talk about that some too. First of all, we need to be giving a lot of these folks, and again, this comes to me from the juvenile detention center that I worked at. You know, a lot of these folks are not equipped to be on the outside. They don't have a lot of job skills. They need education. But then when they get out, they also need support. It's, again, you know, how do we help people transition from a very structured environment to a less structured environment? And I think that, again, is something that we need to be doing. We need to be placing more of an emphasis on what happens after somebody leaves prison. Then, I'm sorry, this phone is driving me nuts. What do we do with them? We need to give them support, and that would be, you know, job training, other things like, you know, just how do you live on the outside? We need to give them that kind of training, both in prison and then once they get out.
Of the three major responsibilities, the Lieutenant Governor, that person would also be the chair of the PA Emergency Management Agency, usually known as PEMA. Mike, have you given any thought to this part of the job that you're running for?
Yeah, and I've been giving a lot of thought of it too, because of the situation we're in. You know, a few weeks ago, we had 5 straight weeks where we had 1,000-year storms. And due to climate change, not here in Pennsylvania, but across this country. So this is going to be a very important job for the Lieutenant Governor. We need to be prepared for emergencies, and we are definitely not. I know that here in Cherry Valley, we live in a valley. I don't live in a valley, I live up on the side of the hill. But you know, if we get a 1,000-year storm here, there's going to be some serious issues. And one of the problems, again, with emergency management in Cherry Valley is that we are a small community and we don't have the resources to pay a emergency management coordinator. So it's a volunteer position. And unfortunately, it's a position that's hard to fill. So what I would say is that we need to rethink, even on the county level, how we are preparing for disasters. And that's something we need to do real quick.
Mike, I want to talk about your campaign here, but first, the basics. Would you just tell us briefly, to you, what are the principles of the Green Party?
I'm glad you asked, because, you know, a lot of times people think the Green Party and they think green, the only thing we're interested in is the environment. And of course, that's not the case. The Green Party, we have something called the 4 pillars. And, you know, one of them, the first one is peace. The second one's ecology. The second one is social justice. And the last one is democracy. We think those are the foundation of everything that we do. So, again, the Green Party, we're looking to make the decisions closer and closer to the people. We're very concerned about the environment, sure, but we're concerned about things like jobs and that kind of stuff too. And how do we make those decisions? I don't think we want to rely on fuzzy-headed folks from Harrisburg to tell local communities what's the best way to increase employment in a certain area. I think we need to consult with the people closest to the problem, and we need to listen to them with respect. So that's one thing. Again, we also are looking to rebuild local economies through, build the economy in general by building local economies. Again, rural Pennsylvania, you know, once upon a time, we were able to feed ourselves. Now the farm economy is in tatters. The average farmer in Pennsylvania, I think, is 57 years old. We're losing farmers. We need to rebuild that. 16 cents on a dollar in, you know, food dollar goes to the farmer itself. We need to rethink our agricultural policy. We need to actually listen to what farmers need, just on. And we need to be future focused. That's another thing that the Greens are all about. What can we do to keep the world functioning well?
Mike, we only have about 4 minutes left in our program. As a member of the Green Party, can you talk about the challenges of getting on the ballot? For example, how many signatures you were required to get?
Yeah, we needed to get 5,000 signatures, which is, I think, about twice what the Democrats and Republicans had to get. But more to the point, we also had to get way more than that because we knew that there was a very good chance that either the Democrats or Republicans would challenge our signatures. And that's kind of challenging when you're talking about, I'm talking about getting 5,000 signatures. It's kind of challenging when you're talking about a minor party. We don't have tons of money. So it's a lot of work getting it done. And just to branch off, not only the Green Party, but several candidates from the Keystone Party were kicked off. I think some libertarians were also, they lost their ability to be on the ballot because the Democrats challenged their signatures. Republicans also challenged signatures. But the thing is, I looked just a little while ago, and there are 203 state reps up for election this fall. I think I saw that about 80. I stopped counting at 80, I should say. I stopped counting. 80 are running unopposed. We need to have viable third parties in the race because of the way things have been gerrymandered. It's not worth a Democrat's money and effort to run in some districts because it's stacked. So we need other voices.
Speaking of other voices, Mike, can you take a minute and talk about Christina DiGiulio? She's the Green candidate running for governor.
Yeah, I love Christina. She is, I would call her a disruptor. She's an analytical chemist from the Department of Defense. She's retired. She's much younger than me. She's retired with a disability. She got Lyme's disease. But yeah, she's tireless. She works her butt off. She's been, for the last several years, she's been a community watchdog. She helps people monitoring things like air and water. She's tireless. She's bright. I love working with Christina.
Lieutenant Governor often takes on extra projects. So what would you like to work on if you're elected?
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to it earlier, corruption. I think we have probably one of the most corrupt state governments in the country. Like I said, I already alluded to the gift ban, but it's way beyond that. Our campaign finance laws are such that, for instance, in one infamous case, a state legislator was able to finance a wine tasting trip to Europe from his campaign contributions. Not a good thing. We need to get Gene Yaw. He's chair of the Senate Environmental Resources and Energy Committee, has an outside job. He works for a law firm that, guess what, works with the oil and gas industry, the very people he writes laws for.
Mike, I hate to interrupt you. We only have 30 seconds left on our program. Use that time and tell our viewers why they should vote for you.
I think you should vote for me because I'm not going to be bought. But realize you're not just voting for me. We can't just vote for a lieutenant governor. You have to vote for a ticket. And neither Christine nor I will take any money from anybody. We'll take it from small donors, obviously, but we are not going to take money from lobbyists, period.
Michael Bagdes-Canning, Green Party candidate for lieutenant governor. Thanks for your time.